Welcome to the Deep Dive. Today, we're going deep into the world of George Orwell's 1984. You've brought some seriously thought-provoking excerpts, like little windows into the society where Big Brother's always watching, and the thought police are, well, policing thoughts.
It's amazing how this book, written way back in 1949, can still feel so relevant, like it's a stark warning about what happens when power goes unchecked, and how easily truth can be manipulated.
Okay, so you want to dig into how Orwell creates this chilling world, like the specific details that make it both terrifying and believable.
Absolutely. Orwell's a master at using vivid imagery and these really messed up social structures to paint a picture that gets under your skin and makes you think.
Right, like that image of London in the excerpts. It's not just a backdrop, it sets the whole mood, doesn't it?
Yeah. Totally. Orwell describes London as this bombed-out shell of a city, with grimy streets and these giant telescreens everywhere blasting propaganda. But it's more than just the physical decay. It's the feeling of being constantly watched. You know those posters with Big Brother's eyes staring out? And the caption, "Big Brother is watching you." It's like this constant reminder that someone's always looking over your shoulder.
Ugh, it's giving me the creeps just thinking about it. And then there are those ministries with those names that are so obviously ironic. It's like Orwell's smacking us in the face with how twisted this society is.
Exactly. The ministries of truth, peace, love, and plenty. Each one's a complete contradiction of its actual function. The Ministry of Truth is actually in charge of rewriting history and churning out propaganda. And the Ministry of Love, they're the ones who dole out the torture and punishment.
Okay, that's just messed up. Of all of them, the Ministry of Love seems especially creepy. What do the excerpts say about that?
They described it as this massive, windowless fortress surrounded by barbed wire and hidden machine guns. It's this super secret place that people are terrified of. Even party members only go there if they absolutely have to. And even then, it's like navigating a maze designed to freak you out.
So it's like the Ministry of Love is the physical embodiment of the party's power and control.
Exactly. It's this constant reminder that stepping out of line has serious consequences. And it's against this backdrop that we meet Winston, the main character. He's not some big shot rebel leader. He's just an ordinary guy working for the party. But he's got this spark of rebellion in him.
Yeah, he's struggling with his own thoughts, right? Like she hates the party, but he's also terrified of them.
Yes. What's interesting about Winston is his self-awareness. He knows he's living a lie, that the party controls everything, even his thoughts. And that's why he starts writing in that diary, even though it's incredibly dangerous.
There's this line that really stuck out to me where he talks about how awkward his handwriting feels because he's so used to typing everything. It makes you realize how much the party has taken over even the simplest, most personal things.
It's like technology has become another way for the party to control people, right? Like they've eliminated the need for handwriting, which means they've eliminated this whole avenue for personal expression.
Exactly. And there's the constant fear of the telescreens. Winston knows that even turning his back on one could be seen as suspicious. He's trapped in this mental prison where he can't even trust his own thoughts.
Man, that's heavy stuff. It makes his little acts of rebellion, the diary, his secret thoughts, even more courageous.
Absolutely. He's taking a huge risk just by thinking for himself.
And the party's got this whole system in place to stop people from thinking for themselves, right? Like that whole newspeak thing. Right. Newspeak is like a linguistic weapon. It's designed to limit thought by getting rid of words that are dangerous to the party.
So fewer words, fewer thoughts, less chance of rebellion.
Exactly. It's seriously messed up. They even have words like duckspick, which can be good or bad depending on who you're talking about, and doublethink, which is like the ability to believe two contradictory things at the same time. It's all about twisting language to control how people think.
It's like brainwashing, basically.
Yeah.
And they even control something as natural as sex, right?
Right. The party sees sex as just a way to make more party members, not something pleasurable or about connecting with another person. It's all very cold and calculated, designed to keep people from forming meaningful relationships.
So the party's basically trying to erase everything that makes us human.
Exactly. They want to control not just what people do, but what they think and feel. And that's where Winston's memories of the past become so important. He clings to these fragments of the past, these little glimpses of a time before the party took over, as proof that there was another way to live.
It's like those memories are his only connection to his old self, to the person he was before the party got to him.
Exactly. They're like little rebellions in themselves, these flashes of truth in a world built on lies.
But it's not all doom and gloom for Winston, right? He meets Julia, and they start this secret affair.
Yes. Julia's like a breath of fresh air in this oppressive world.
Hmm?
She's more pragmatic than Winston. She rebels because she wants to live and experience life. Not necessarily to overthrow the party, but for Winston, their relationship is this incredible act of defiance.
And they have these secret meetings in the countryside. And that rented room above Mr. Charrington's shop. It's like they've carved out this little space of freedom for themselves, even if it's just temporary.
Those details, like the coral paperweight
Yep.
and the rhyme, oranges and lemons, they take on this whole new meaning in the context of their forbidden love. They become symbols of hope and beauty in a world where those things are almost extinct.
And it's that room, that feeling of safety, that ultimately leads to their downfall, right?
Yes, their little bubble bursts when they're captured by the thought police. And it turns out Mr. Charrington was a thought police agent all along. Talk about a plot twist.
Ugh, that's awful. It's like they were being watched the whole time. It's like no matter how hard you try, you can't escape the party's grasp.
That capture is a major turning point in the novel. It's like the moment when the hope of rebellion gets crushed under the weight of the party's power.
And it takes us into the darkest part of the story.
Yeah,
Winston's time in the Ministry of Love.
exactly. This is where the true horror of the party's control is revealed. It's not just about punishment, it's about completely breaking someone down and rebuilding them in the party's image.
And it's where we see the full force of their psychological manipulation, especially with this idea of Room 101.
Room 101 is like the ultimate nightmare. Orwell doesn't actually tell us what's in there, he just says it's the thing you're most afraid of, which makes it even scarier because it's different for everyone.
It's like your worst fears made real, designed to break you completely.
Exactly. It's the ultimate symbol of the party's power. They can literally torture you with your own fears.
And it's through this fear, through the torture, that Winston is ultimately broken.
He betrays everything he believes in, including his love for Julia. It's heartbreaking to see him forced to embrace doublethink, to actually believe that 2 + 2 = 5 just because the party says so.
It shows how the party can twist reality itself to fit their agenda.
It's a complete victory for the party, but a devastating loss for Winston.
And this is where things take a turn for the worse, right? I mean, they release Winston, but he's not really free.
Exactly. He's become a shell of his former self, a walking, talking example of the party's power. He drinks gin to numb the pain, works a pointless job, and completely embraces the party's ideology. It's like they've colonized his mind.
It's like even though he's physically free, his mind is still trapped in the party's prison.
Right, and it's in this state that he runs into Julia again, but their reunion is anything but happy. There's no spark between them, no love, no recognition. It's like the party has successfully erased their connection.
It's like they're both just ghosts of their former selves, haunting the ruins of their own lives. It's so sad.
It's one of the most tragic elements of the novel. The party hasn't just broken their bodies, they've broken their spirits, their love, their very essence.
Wow, what a journey. From those little flickers of rebellion to this complete and utter defeat. It's a lot to process.
It definitely is. But we've only just scratched the surface. There's so much more to unpack in Orwell's world.
Well, I've got to pause here for now, but in part 2, we'll dive deeper into those concepts like doublethink and newspeak, and explore how they're used to control the citizens of Oceania.
We'll also look at why the party needs constant war, and how they use fear and surveillance to maintain their grip on power.
So join us next time for part 2 of our deep dive into 1984. Welcome back to the deep dive. We're picking up where we left off, in the dark and twisty world of George Orwell's 1984. Last time, we talked about Winston's capture and how the party uses fear and surveillance to control people.
Yes, and one of the most chilling aspects of that control is this concept of doublethink, which we really see in action during Winston's interrogation and torture.
Okay, help me out here. Because doublethink is one of those things that always makes my head spin. How can someone actually believe in two contradictory things at once?
That's the genius and the terror of it. The party forces people to abandon reason and logic. Remember that example from the excerpts, where Winston is ultimately forced to accept that 2 + 2 = 5. It shows how the party can literally warp reality just by saying something is true over and over again.
So it's not just about lying or pretending. It's about actually believing the lie, even when, deep down that it's a lie. It's like some kind of insane mental gymnastics.
Exactly. And this is how the party controls history. They constantly rewrite the past to fit their current agenda. And because of doublethink, people accept it as the truth.
It's like in the Ministry of Truth, where Winston's job is to literally change records and erase evidence of the past. He's making the lie real. And then he has to believe it too.
It highlights how the party manipulates information and controls the narrative. They're not just telling lies, they're eliminating any possibility of a different truth. And that's where Newspeak comes in.
Okay, so Newspeak isn't just a simplified version of English, right? It's designed to actually make certain thoughts impossible to think.
Exactly, by shrinking the vocabulary and getting rid of words like freedom or rebellion. Newspeak aims to limit what people are even capable of thinking.
There's that example of duckspeak in the excerpts. It can be a compliment or an insult, depending on who you're talking about, which is so messed up because it blurs the lines between right and wrong.
Exactly, and that's the point. Newspeak is all about controlling thought by controlling language.
It's insidious. And this control extends to every aspect of life in Oceania. We see it in the party's twisted attitude toward sex, where pleasure and emotional connection are forbidden.
Absolutely. Sex is reduced to a purely biological function, a duty to the state. It's all about eliminating anything that could challenge their control, any kind of expression or human connection that falls outside the party line.
So in a world where individuality is basically illegal, Winston and Julia's relationship is like this incredibly powerful act of rebellion.
Their affair is a rejection of the party's attempts to control human nature. Their stolen moments of intimacy, their moments of genuine connection, become acts of defiance in this sterile, joyless world.
I love that detail in the excerpts about the coral paperweight they find. It's this delicate, beautiful object that represents a past the party is trying to erase. It's like a little spark of hope. In all that darkness.
That paperweight is a symbol of everything the party wants to destroy. Beauty, history, individual expression. It's a reminder that these things can still exist, even in the most oppressive environments. But it's also incredibly fragile, just like their relationship.
And that fragility is really driven home. When they get caught in Mr. Charrington's room, it turns out he's a thought police agent. And that whole sense of security they had just shatters.
That moment is a gut punch. It shows that there's no escape from the party's watchful eyes, that even the most private spaces are subject to their control. And it marks the beginning of Winston's descent into the true horror of the Ministry of Love.
The Ministry of Love, the place where they break you, where they turn you into a mindless drone who loves Big Brother.
Exactly. It's a place where the party's methods of control and manipulation are laid bare. They use physical and psychological torture to strip away your identity and rebuild you in the party's image.
And then there's this looming threat of Room 101, which we talked about a bit before. What do you think is the scariest thing about it?
The fact that Orwell never tells us exactly what's in there. He just says it's the thing you fear the most, your worst nightmare made real. It plays on this primal fear of the unknown. And that's even more terrifying than any specific torture.
It's like they're saying, we know what terrifies you, and we're going to use it against you.
Exactly. Room 101 represents the ultimate power of the party. The ability to exploit your deepest fears, to break you completely. And, tragically, it works. Winston is forced to betray everything he believes in, including Julia.
He's forced to embrace doublethink, to accept that 2 + 2 = 5, even though every fiber of his being knows it's wrong.
It's a chilling demonstration of how the party can literally warp reality to fit their agenda. They don't just want obedience, they want total submission, the eradication of individual thought and will. And they achieve that with Winston.
And then they release him.
Yeah.
But he's just a shadow of his former self. He's physically free, but mentally he's still a prisoner.
He becomes this empty shell, a walking embodiment of the party's victory. He drinks to numb the pain, works a meaningless job, and spends his free time passively absorbing propaganda. It's like they've colonized his mind, his thoughts, his very essence.
It's like he's become a ghost, haunting the ruins of his own life. And then he runs into Julia again, but there's nothing left between them.
That encounter is heartbreaking. It shows how effective the party's methods are at crushing the human spirit. They've destroyed their love, their connection, their shared rebellion. They're both just hollow shells of the people they once were.
It's like that scene in the excerpts where they can't remember the rest of the rhyme. Oranges and lemons. That rhyme, which used to be a symbol of their shared past and their hope for the future, is now just another fragment lost in the fog of the party's control.
That detail perfectly captures the tragedy of Winston's fate. He's lost everything. His love, his individuality, his very sense of self. And the novel ends with his complete submission to the party, with this chilling acceptance of Big Brother and the twisted reality he represents.
It's a bleak ending that leaves you with this heavy feeling in your chest. It makes you wonder if resistance is even possible in a world like that.
That's the power of Orwell's writing. He doesn't give us easy answers, but he forces us to confront these uncomfortable questions about the nature of truth, freedom, and the human spirit.
Welcome back to the Deep Dive. We've spent the last two parts really digging into George Orwell's 1984. And man, it's been intense. But it's also made me think about how these themes connect to our world today.
It's crazy, right? I mean, we're not living in Oceania with telescreens watching our every move, but there are definitely some unsettling parallels, especially when you think about modern technology.
Yeah. Like, we're almost willingly giving up our privacy these days. We've got smartphones tracking our every move, smart speakers listening to our conversations, social media algorithms feeding us content based on our every click. It's not that different from those telescreens in 1984, is it?
It's definitely something to think about. The way technology is becoming so integrated into our lives, it's easy to see how it could be used to manipulate and control us, just like in the novel.
Right. And then there's the whole issue of misinformation and fake news online. It's getting harder and harder to figure out what's true and what's not. And that feels very 1984 to me.
It's like the Ministry of Truth has gone digital. Instead of literally rewriting history, people are spreading lies and propaganda online, and it's having a real impact on how we see the world.
It's scary. It's like we're losing this shared understanding of reality. And that's exactly what the party wanted in 1984.
And that's where those warnings about language and thought control become so relevant. Remember Newspeak? The whole idea was to limit thought by controlling the words people could use.
Yeah. And while we don't have Newspeak in the real world, there are definitely attempts to control language and restrict certain kinds of speech.
Think about the debates around political correctness or cancel culture. There's this idea that certain words or ideas are off limits, and people are afraid to speak their minds for fear of being attacked or silenced.
Right. And while the intent behind those movements might be good, it's a slippery slope. It makes you wonder who gets to decide what's acceptable and what's not.
Exactly, and that's why critical thinking is so important. We can't just blindly accept everything we're told, whether it's from the government, the media, or even our own social circles. We have to be willing to question, to challenge, to think for ourselves.
Just like Winston, trying to hold on to those fragments of his memory, those glimpses of a world before the party.
Exactly. He was fighting to keep that spark of individuality alive, even when it felt like everything was stacked against him.
So what can we do? How do we avoid becoming like Winston, completely swallowed up by the party's lies and propaganda?
I think it starts with being aware, recognizing those subtle ways we're being manipulated, whether it's through targeted advertising, biased news sources, or even the language we use to talk about certain issues. And then it's about being willing to push back, to seek out different perspectives, to have those uncomfortable conversations, to question the narratives we're given.
It's like Orwell is giving us a blueprint for resistance, not through violence or revolution, but through critical thinking and a refusal to let go of our individual freedom.
Exactly. He's saying, don't let them control your mind. Don't let them tell you what to think. Don't let them take away your humanity.
1984 is a dark book, but there's a glimmer of hope in that message. It reminds us that we have the power to resist, to fight for our freedom, to stay human, even in a world that's trying to turn us into machines.
And that's a powerful message to carry with us, no matter what challenges we face in our own lives.
Absolutely. Well, that's a good place to wrap up our deep dive into 1984. It's been a wild ride, but I feel like I've learned a lot.
Me too. It's a book that stays with you long after you finish reading it, and hopefully it's left you with some food for thought, some questions to ponder, and a renewed sense of the importance of individual freedom and critical thinking in a world that's constantly trying to shape our minds.
Thanks for taking this deep dive with us. Until next time, keep exploring, keep questioning, and never stop fighting for the right to think for yourself.